Hello everybody, my name is Summer Segovia and this is my law case. It is federal law case number 203 CV 229 T 30 SPC, and it is Florida Marine Contractors et al. As the plaintiffs versus Stephen A. Williams, Director of United States Fish and Wildlife Service et al. As the defendants. This is for Class ATE 3515 at St. Petersburg College. Before we begin, I would like to say two things. The first is I apologize if I mess up the pronunciation of anything. Sometimes the pronunciation just slips my mind. And the second is that there are three important terms that I would like to cover before we really start digging into the case. The first is Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. This states that there must be authorization from the Secretary of the Army for the disposal of dredged or filled material into United States waters and wetlands at approved disposal sites. The second is incidental taking. This is not exactly defined in the Endangered Species Act, but the statute defines the term as to harass, hunt, capture, or kill, or attempt to harass, hunt, capture, or kill any marine mammal. The third is Marine Mammal Protection Act, or MMPA. This is meant to protect marine mammals from human activities in areas that serve as their natural habitat without placing geographical limitations on them. On April 22, 2004, the Florida Marine Contractors Association, or FMCA, applied for permits through state authorities to construct recreational docks in some of Florida's inland waterways. State authorities then passed these permit requests to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for federal approval under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. The Corps ended up consulting with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services due to the potential negative impacts on manatees in the waterways. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recommended the denial of Florida Marine Contractors Association's permit requests due to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This is because of possible incidental taking and other negative impacts on Florida manatees due to a lack of protective measures, such as speed or wake zone signs, enforcement in water and on land, endangered species signs, and other notices to not interact with manatees or other endangered wildlife species. After hearing this decision, Florida Marine Contractors Association challenged the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the basis that the Marine Mammal Protection Act does not apply to residential or recreational docks on inland water. They sought out judicial review under the Administrative Procedures Act. The Administrative Procedures Act controls the process that federal agencies develop and issue regulations. It is important to note that Florida Marine Contractors Association did not challenge or disagree that having these permits would have a negligible or negative impact on manatees, but rather they disagreed with the fact that the Marine Mammal Protection Act did not apply to residential or recreational areas. Judge Moody of the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Florida found that the Marine Mammal Protection Act did in fact apply to Florida Marine Contractors Association's proposed activities. This led to Judge Moody denying FMCA's permits, ruling in favor of the defendants. This is because the Marine Mammal Protection Act is meant to protect marine mammals from human activities. While the court went through legislative history of the act, it was found that it was intended to provide broad protection to marine mammals even in states' inland waters, and that it was not limited to commercial activities or certain geographical areas. The Marine Mammal Protection Act was also meant to prevent the reduction of marine mammals to ensure that they have an optimal, sustainable population. In a less wordy version, essentially, the Marine Mammal Protection Act does apply broadly to human activities that affect marine mammals in all areas of their habitat, which include state inland waters, in order to prevent their depletion and ensure their conservation. After this, the case was closed and dismissed. I could not find any more information regarding this case as to what happened afterwards, if they were able to build said recreational or residential docks. I really couldn't even find information on where this was located. All that I really know is that it was somewhere in the Middle District of Florida, because that is where Judge Moody did the ruling. So with this limited information that I do have, I do agree with Judge Moody's ruling. Building residential docks would have caused more harm than good. I do think that maybe FMCA could have been able to obtain their permits if they had collaborated with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. This could, again, similar to the things that were mentioned before, could have been introducing signs that were posted in the water for boats, including wake signs and speed limit signs, enforcement around the area on land and in the water, and signs posted on the docks to notify pedestrians and other waterway users about interacting with wildlife in general, but endangered wildlife, who to call if there's a situation that's concerning, rather than the person seeing this concerning event physically touching an animal. As there have been many cases, as I'm sure everybody has seen, somebody jumping into the water to save an animal. There is that, but manatees are protected. It is illegal to touch manatees because they are protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act, and it can be considered harassment, stress out the animals, and alter their natural behavior, making them more vulnerable to some injuries from boats. So definitely in that case, I agree with Judge Moody. One thing that I did find pretty interesting is that the West Indian manatee moved from being endangered to threatened in 2017. I found that pretty interesting because this case was originally started in 2004. So it took over 10 years for the manatees to be downlisted from endangered to threatened. But I do want to point out that while humans can definitely make up even though humans can have a major impact on causing manatees to be threatened, there are some other environmental factors that can cause manatees to become threatened. They are threatened by the loss of warm water habitats, period die-off from red tides, and unusual cold weather events. I found another thing not really interesting per se. That's not the right word to use. I just don't know the right word. But based off of the Marine Mammal Commission's website, there was a recent unusual mortality event from 2020 to 2022. This caused starvation among manatees due to the lack of forage in the Indian River Lagoon, as phytoplankton blooms led to extensive seagrass losses. It was so bad that the Fish and Wildlife Service had to implement a pilot supplemental feeding program in both the winter of 2021 to 2022 and 2022 to 2023 in the Indian River Lagoon to help sustain manatees throughout the cold months until warmer temperatures really allowed them to disperse and find other areas to forage. And it took pretty much about 400,000 pounds of romaine lettuce to feed them at a single site. And it was discontinued in winter 2023 to 2024, since seagrass monitoring efforts indicated adequate foraging resources. I wanted to point this out specifically because during the winter months, of course, Florida sees a lot of manatees, especially in central to South Florida. But during the warmer months, they're able to disperse and go out. They can go as far west as Texas and as far north as Massachusetts. So I feel that while Florida is considered kind of a manatee-heavy state, other states can see manatees during the summer months, and it's really pertinent that we have these acts in place and these rulings in place to help protect them in other areas where maybe it doesn't occur to people to focus on protecting endangered species or threatened species, if that makes sense. Here are my list of references that I used for this project. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask. I will try my best to answer them. Again, I could not find much information on this case outside of the 2 law case websites that I found it on. So again, I'll try my best, but thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your day.